Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Eruvin Daf Lamed, the task continues the discussion of 2 days of Kedusha, Yom Tov and Shabbos, or Yom Tov and Yom Tov that are near each other, one following the other, and how you can set up an Erev Chatzeres concerning those two. Again, the main issue is, are they considered to be one Kedusha, and therefore whatever Erev you have in the beginning has to run through the end, you can't change it, or is considered to be 2 separate Kedushas. So the Daf today will finish up discussing whether or not there's a problem of hachana to set up an Erev at the end of the first day in order to work for the second day. Then we get to a Mishnah, and the Mishnah changes the topic to Rosh Hashanah. Is Rosh Hashanah 2 separate Kedushas, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, or are they one Kedusha? Machlok is about that. We'll determine who the Tanoim are. And the Mishnah brings 3 separate cases in which we need to figure out whether Rosh Hashanah is one Kedusha or 2 Kedushas, and the Gemara will explain who the opinions are and flesh out these machlokas. So first of all, we are discussing the concept of hachana. Hachana again means that you cannot do something on one day to prepare for the next day if it's a separate Kedusha. So the Gemara had said earlier that Rabbah said there's a problem of setting up an Erev near the end of one day of Yom Tov or Shabbos in order to have an Erev Tchumen set up for the next day. You cannot set up the bread, you cannot set the bread out and say this is an Erev, which is what you have to say. So the Gemara had also said that Abaye and Rabba Bar Chanan argued, and they said, no, there's no problem, you can set up whatever you want, it's not called Hachana. So the Gemara here brings the statement of Rav Yehuda, which clearly indicates that there is a problem of Hachana. Rav Yehuda says as follows, he says, you can set up Eruvin for 2 days as follows. Either the first day, meaning when you're setting it up before it's ever Yom Tov, and you're setting up for the first day of Yom Tov, you could set it up by going to the place that you want your permanent residence to be, or by setting food there. And then you'll have to say that this food is my Erev, this is my permanent residence. You can do either one the first day. The second day, you could either go there, because then you don't have to say anything, just your residence is wherever you are, or you can use the same bread that was set up already from yesterday. But you cannot set up bread there in the first place that was never set up before. If that bread was not set aside as an Erev, you cannot do it for the first time towards the end of the first day in order to be an Erev for the second day. That you can't do. And then the reason for that clearly is because that would be Hachana. You have to say that this is an Erev, and that's Hachana that's preparing for the next day. Now, Shmuel is the one who fills in that has to be the same bread. Rav Yehuda just said you have to use a bread, and on that the Gemara says that if you look in the Mishnah, which was quoted in Daf Lamed Ches, it's clear that this is the halacha, because it describes somebody who's making an Erev with bread, and he says he should go before Yom Tov, set aside the bread, say this is an Erev, then he should take it home in order that it not get eaten or ruined, and then he should bring the same bread back again tomorrow, and now he doesn't have to say anything. So you see that it says he has to bring the same bread back. Must be the reason is because if you have to designate new bread as an Erev Tchumen, that would be Hachana. So Gemara asks, so those Amoraim, Abaye and Rabba Bar Chanan, how do they understand this Mishnah? They say that there's no problem of Hachana. So Gemara says, they'll tell you, the Mishnah is just telling you good advice. It's better to use the same bread. Bring the bread home so you could use it again so it shouldn't get destroyed. It's not a halachic issue. That's not the reason. Okay, that ends that Gemara. Now the Gemara goes to the concept of Rosh Hashanah. Now let's understand Rosh Hashanah. Why would Rosh Hashanah be different than Shabbos following Yom Tov and Yom Tov following Shabbos? So Yom Tov and Shabbos that are together are both definite, certain days of Kedusha. One's a Yom Tov, one's a Shabbos. Rosh Hashanah and the other Yomim Tovim that are 2 days outside Eretz Yisrael, only one of them is really supposed to be the Yom Tov. It's supposed to be a 1 day Yom Tov. Now, for all Yom Tov besides Eretz Yisrael, where we keep 2 days outside Eretz Yisrael, there it's Midrabanan on the second day. We don't know, or we didn't know in the days when we established the month based on when the moon was seen. We didn't know which day was Yom Tov, so we have to keep them both. We couldn't find out fast enough. Rosh Hashanah was different. Rosh Hashanah, even in Yerushalayim itself, right near the Beis Din, they didn't necessarily always know which day would be Rosh Hashanah. If the first potential day that Rosh Hashanah could be, if no Eidim came to say that it was Rosh Hashanah, then the next day would be Rosh Hashanah. If Eidim did come the first day, though, then the first day was Rosh Hashanah and the second day was not. The problem started when they started receiving witnesses that came after Mincha on the first day. Now, they had to keep Rosh Hashanah the first day, they always had to keep it, and they didn't know whether it would be Rosh Hashanah or not. But what shear should the Levim say when they brought the Korban Tamid in the Beis Hamikdash? So they would wait, and then if no Edom came, no witnesses came to say that today is Rosh Hashanah, they would assume that it was a weekday, it was a regular day, and they would say the shear of the weekday. So it happened once that they did that, and then the Edom came late. And it turned out that today was Rosh Hashanah, and they said the wrong shear. So in order to prevent this, Chazal instituted the following thing. They said, first of all, we're not accepting any witnesses after Mincha time on the first day. If they haven't come by Mincha, we're not accepting them at all. And therefore, they will not be accepted. Now, that would seem to indicate that if the witnesses haven't come, that you should say that the rest of Rosh Hashanah is certain, that the rest of the first day is certainly a regular weekday, because witnesses haven't come and we're not accepting them anymore. But they didn't do that. They made it all Rosh Hashanah anyway, even though witnesses haven't come, and Rosh Hashanah is definitely tomorrow, the second day that it could be. The rest of today is also made definitely Rosh Hashanah, because if we didn't do that, then people would end up doing malacha, and on the days when the witnesses did come, they would get confused and they would assume that it wasn't Rosh Hashanah, because we kept Rosh Hashanah the first half of the day, then we stopped keeping Rosh Hashanah. In order to solve these problems, we just said, you know what, we're not accepting witnesses, and you have to keep Rosh Hashanah from after Mincha time anyway, whether witnesses have come or not, because we don't know what's going to be. So we ended up with 2 full days of Rosh Hashanah. Now, there's going to be a discussion here whether those 2 full days are both Vadai days, they're both definitely Rosh Hashanah, and it's one Kedusha, or if it's 2 separate days. And that's what we're going to see now. So, Rav Yehuda in the Mishnah says that it is considered to be 2 separate days, and this is relevant to 3 halachas. First of all, you can make separate Erev Tchumen. You can make an Erev Tchumen on the east the first day and the west the second day, or vice versa. You can make no Erev Tchumen the first day and Erev Tchumen the second day, or vice versa. You can do whatever you want. It's 2 separate days, 2 separate Kedushas. It's not considered to be one long thing. Now, another nafkamina lahalacha, another case where this makes a difference is if somebody wants to separate Truma on Yom Tov. The halacha is you're not allowed to separate Truma on Yom Tov. You're fixing your food. So what could you do? So this guy says as follows. The first day, Rosh Hashanah, he has a basket of food. He wants to eat some of it. So he says, you know what? I'm taking Truma. I'm setting it aside. This is Truma. However, it's only Truma if today is a weekday. If it's not Rosh Hashanah. On the possibility that today is actual Rosh Hashanah, I'm making it tonight that this is not Truma. And then the next day, he'll do the same thing. I'll say, listen, if today's Rosh Hashanah, then yesterday wasn't. So what I did, yesterday was Truma. So that's not a problem. It's already fixed, this stuff. If, however, yesterday was Rosh Hashanah, then today is not. So then I'm setting aside this grain now to be Truma, and now I can eat the rest of it. This way, by the time he's performed this Tanai procedure on the second day, he can already eat this stuff by the second day. But that only works if one of the 2 days is definitely not Rosh Hashanah. If they're both considered to be Rosh Hashanah for sure, it doesn't work. But Rabbi Yehuda says it works, and therefore they're considered to be 2 separate things. The last halacha is an egg which is laid on Yom Tov. So the halacha is that it's forbidden for the day itself. And Rabbi Yehuda says if it's laid the first day, it's permitted the second day. It's not a problem. It's considered to be a separate day. You don't say that it's one long 48-hour day. On all these 3 halachas, the Mishnah says the Chachamim did not agree. They felt that it was one Kedusha, it was one long Yom Tov, one day, even though it was 48 hours. Now the Gemara adds that about the tefillos of Rosh Hashanah. So Rabbi Daisa ben Horkinus said the Chazan should say the following formula on Rosh Hashanah. He should say, he called it Rosh Chodesh. Hayom today, im lemachar, ulemachar. He said, Hayom im lemachar. Today, if today is Rosh Hashanah, is Rosh Chodesh, make it today. If it's tomorrow, it's tomorrow. And then the next day he would say, im hayom im emesh, if today or yesterday. Meaning whichever one it is, I'm saying, he's obviously considering it to be 2 separate days, and he's saying whichever day it is, that's the one that I'm asking you for. Now the Mishnah again says that the Chachamim did not agree to that, and the Gemara will clarify, not on today's daf, but later, what did they not agree? Calling it Rosh Chodesh or saying a formula of today or tomorrow? What exactly was the issue? Okay, now, who is this Chachamim who don't agree? Who is this Chachamim who say that it's one long Kedusha and you can't have separate Eruvin for the first day and second day of Rosh Hashanah, and he can't separate Truma al Tanai on each of the days, and an egg is forbidden on both days if it was laid on the first day. The Gemara says it's Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara quotes a brisa where Rabbi Yossi clearly says that opinion, and he's arguing on what are called the Chachamim there, but in our Mishnah we see it's Rav Yehuda. So it's Rav Yehuda against Rav Yossi. So the Gemara says that Rav Yossi said to them, he said, I don't understand you. You clearly agree that if witnesses don't come by Mincha time the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we're not accepting them anymore. We still keep Rosh Hashanah the rest of the day. Why? Obviously, because it's 2 full, definite days of Kedusha. It's not considered to be a not sure. I don't know which one it is. You're not accepting them anymore. If the whole issue is that witnesses might come, they can't come anymore. So you should you should not have to keep Kedusha. Obviously, I'm right, and that it's not a suffix issue. Now, he's understanding that Rabbi Yehuda's position was that the reason why Rosh Hashanah is considered to be 2 separate days is because it's only a suffix. One of the days is Rosh Hashanah, one of the days is not. So whichever it is, it is. I could set up a new Erev Tchumen, because if it's the second day, then the first day was nothing. So what's the problem? So the Gemara answers, the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Yossi, you're not correct. It really is a suffix. You want to know why we're keeping Rosh Hashanah on the first day after Mincha if witnesses can't come anymore? The reason is because if we don't, the people start doing Malacha, they'll end up doing Malacha on the first part of the day, which may actually become Rosh Hashanah, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen, so therefore we're not going to do that. Okay, now the Gemara asks on the Mishnah, we've seen 3 cases. The case of Eruvin, Eruvei Tchumen, the case of Truma separating with a Tanai, and the case of the Gemara wants to know why do you need all 3? If Rabbi Yehuda is telling me the halacha that they're considered to be separate days, just say it once. The Gemara says, if you only told me the case of Eruvin, then I may think that it doesn't apply to the Meiser case, because people will see what you're doing and they'll really think you're taking Meiser on Yom Tov, and that is a potential for mistakes. We don't want that. And even if we told you that case, we wouldn't see it in the case of the Beitza, because there, using an egg that was born on Yom Tov is very similar to squeezing liquid out of a fruit or other types of malachais, fruits which fall off a tree on Yom Tov, liquids which flow by themselves out of a fruit on Yom Tov, things which come out, food which comes detached from its source on Yom Tov are all very similar. We may think you should make Xavier from one to the other. Shouldn't allow you to do this, lest you do that, and that's why you think it's forbidden. And Rabbi Yehuda has to tell me clearly that it is not forbidden. Okay, now the Gemara discusses the other Yomim Tovim, which have 2 days of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. These are slightly more lenient, these cases, because the second day is definitely just a suffix. They didn't know which day had been set aside as Rosh Chodesh, and therefore which day Yom Tov was in Yerushalayim, and therefore they had to keep 2 days out of suffix. But it's definitely a suffix, and it's definitely only midrabanan. So the Gemara quotes a brisa here, which spells out what Rabbi Yehuda said about the baskets and how you set aside the truma from the baskets and make it tonight. And then the Gemara adds, and Rabbi Yossi said you're not allowed to do that, and Rabbi Yossi said you're not even allowed to do that on Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golias, the second day of Yom Tov in exile. That term refers to other Yomim Tovim, not Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah was not Yom Tov Sheni in exile, it was Rosh Hashanah everywhere. So when it says, we see that Rabbi Yossi is machmer, he considers it to be the 2 days to be one long Kedusha, and Vadai said, and for sure, Yom Tov, even in the Chutz La'aretz. It's a very strange psak. Why would he say such a thing? Why would he say that about Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, Pesach, and Shavuos? So Gemara says that there was an actual incident that happened over here. There was a deer which was trapped. It was caught by a guy on the first day of Yom Tov, one of these in Chutz La'aretz. It was given to a Jew, and then the Jew slaughtered it on the second day of Yom Tov. Now, you're allowed to shecht, you're allowed to slaughter on Yom Tov. Problem is, you're not allowed to use a malacha that was performed by a guy. A guy is not allowed to do things for a Jew. If the guy trapped it, and the Jew takes it from him, he has to wait until after Yom Tov is over. So what are they supposed to do with this thing? So Gemara says that Rav Nachman and Rav Chizda ate it. They said there's no problem. If Yom Tov was the first day, so the guy caught it then the guy caught it on Yom Tov. We had to wait until Yom Tov was over and give him enough time we have to leave enough time that it would have taken for him to trap it. So we did leave enough time because the second day wasn't Yom Tov, the first day was. And therefore we're allowed to eat it already by now. But If the first day was not Yom Tov, then there's no problem altogether. The guy trapped it on a weekday, so no need to worry about it. Either way, one of the 2 days is not Yom Tov, and therefore there's no problem. Rav Sheshes didn't eat it. He said, I'm not eating it. So the Gemara said that Rav Nachman says, what should we do about Rav Sheshes? He's not eating it. What could possibly be the reason? Why would you be machmir on that? So Rav Sheshes said, what do you mean? Rav Yossi is. You see Rav Yossi in the Mishnah. And the Gemara was bothered. Rav Yossi's position doesn't make sense. So the Gemara tries to push it off. The Gemara says, first of all, maybe when he said Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galis, he didn't mean other holidays which have 2 days. He meant Rosh Hashanah in exile. Because other holidays don't make sense. That you should be machmir for both of them. So the Gemara says that Rosh Hashanah wasn't happy with that. He said that it shouldn't say Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galios, the second day Yom Tov of the exile. It should say Yom Tov Sheni B'Goyla, the second day in exile, which is referring to Rosh Hashanah when you happen to be in exile in the diaspora. So Gemara says, okay, well maybe what Rav Yossi meant was as follows. Rav Yossi's machmir on the other days of Yom Tov in the same level of chumrah that the Rabbanon who argue on him are machmir on Rosh Hashanah, meaning that Rav Yossi really is mekel. He goes leniently on the other days of Yom Tov. He only has the restrictions which the Rabbanon had on the second day of Rosh Hashanah in Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Sounds like a bit far-fetched pshat, but Rashi says this. He says it's a bit far-fetched, but because of Yossi's position really doesn't make sense, we have to try to find ways of explaining it, and we would accept this far-fetched thing. Either way, that wouldn't help Rav Sheshes, because Rav Sheshes was machmir like this opinion that, like we have seen, is the simple pshat in Rav Yossi. So the Gemara says Rav Sheshes was walking and he met Rabbi Bar Shmuel, and he said to him, tell me something about the halachas of Kedushas Yom Tov. And he said, Rav Yossi agrees that 2 days Yom Tov, besides for Rosh Hashanah, all other ones are not considered to be one long day. One of them is Yom Tov, the other one is not. You just don't know which one. And that means that Rav Sheshes didn't have reason to be a machmir. Rav Sheshes said, listen, if you find Rav Nachman or Rav Chisda, don't tell them this. I'll be embarrassed. So don't fill them in on this little tidbit. Okay, now the Gemara says there's a different version of this incident. A Maimer says this whole discussion with the deer that was shachted had nothing to do with 2 days Yom Tov. It was 1 day of Yom Tov. And the deer was caught by a guy, given to a Jew, and slaughtered all on 1 day. And the issue is something else. The issue is when a guy does something for a Jew, so we know it's forbidden to the Jew he did it for. Here he didn't do it for the Jew. He did it for one Jew. The question is, are other Jews allowed to enjoy that he did? That was this machlokas. That was the issue. Somebody else, Rav Nachman and Rav Chisda and Rav Sheshes, were not the ones that it was caught for the deer. So the question was, when a guy does a malacha for a Jew, are other Jews allowed to use it right away on Yom Tov or not? That was the issue. The Gemara says, now what was the whole thing with Rav Sheshes asking when he met him and he walked and he said, tell me something about Kedushas, and he said, their Regesis Moide, and he said, please don't inform Rav Nachman about this. What was that about? So the Gemara says that never happened. According to this version of events, that entire incident never took place.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.